I grew up in Hobart, which is the Australian equivalent of Dunedin. And I've actually been to Dunedin. Both Hobart and Dunedin have a very steep street, a chocolate factory, a brewery, a football stadium, and a university. And it's about and they're both built on an estuary, so it's about where the similarities end. But yeah, both cold, wet, miserable.
Okay, and so how did you go from living in Hobart to where did you go to school?
Yeah, so how did I go from Hobart? I think the question you were going to go for is how did I then join the Navy?
It was, but then I peeled it back a little bit just so we could carry on that.
Space this out.
Yeah, that's right.
So I grew up in Hobart. I actually grew up in a small town just south of Hobart called Kingston. I say just south, like half-hour drive, not far. Right on the beach, and Tassie weather is very akin to Dunedin weather. It's fantastic place for a beach. I went to two different schools. One a primary school, just next to where I went, so a public school, and then my mum is a teacher and she worked at a private school in the city, and through her I got access and entry into that, which is a Quaker school. And Quaker, if you're familiar with, are very anti-war. I then joined the military, so I'm surprised I'm still invited to the alumni events.
Were there any signs that you were, before talking about the Navy, before talking about the businesses you're in now, were there any signs that you were entrepreneurial at a young age?
My parents would say so. For me, it just seemed like this is what I did on weekends. My first ever startup, if you want to call it that, little micro business, let's call it that, was when I was 8 years old. Was a little business called Sunscreen Squirts. I acquired my mum's, I've always been a fan of branding, I acquired my mum's family value pack sunscreen thing, those big, multi-packs, a family of 5, so. And you can get about 100 squirts out of this thing here. And I went down to the beach and I was selling it for 50 cents a squirt. It was about $50 per container. Now, the cost per container was about 10. Pretty good margins there. I had no idea what I was doing. But I was going down the beach and selling, which is a great business when you're 8 years old. It works quite well. Your kid comes up to you and offers you sunscreen. You go, okay, I'll buy some. It doesn't work at 18, and I hate to think what happens. Did you try it? No. And frankly, if a 36-year-old came up to me now offering me sunscreen from a value pack, I'd be going, no, thank you. The only problem with that business is, as I said before, I grew up in Hobart, which is like Dunedin. And it's a very seasonal business. The season in Hobart's 2 weekends. So that was unfortunately the end of my cosmetic facial product empire at 8 years old. So I guess I was always kind of doing it. The next thing after that is I've always been into electronics, tinkering, breaking things, trying to fix them. I was a little bit older now, and I went to the tip shop. I don't know if you have tip shops here. It's basically, yeah, you do, awesome. So I went to the tip shop and I found all the broken amplifiers and radios and record players and stuff like that, and I'm not that old, but and I fixed them. Pulled components out, put it in, stuffed around a bit, and then sold them to people and made a profit from it, which I then span that into helping larger enterprises, larger sort of audiovisual places fix their speakers, and I was fascinated by large production and lasers and big audio-visual things. So at about 15, 16 years old, I was now fixing professional PA. And the deal was, this is totally off books, the deal was I would fix the speakers and act as a roadie for these big productions. I was setting up big events for Grinspoon and big events for all the big acts that were coming to Hobart, which wasn't many, but there was a few. I'd be out there, plugging all those speakers and afterwards packing up. And the deal was, I could, if I helped the guy set the places up and also fix things when they were broken, which I just loved, I was going to do for free anyway. The deal was anything that was left over at the end of the night, I could take and use for my own things, which made me the most popular kid at school for house parties. Because I would turn up with a 20,000 watt sound system, smoke machines and a laser, and set it up in someone's lounge room while the parents are out, and we'd have a massive party in this tiny little place. And I then turned that into a business, actually doing that somewhat professionally afterwards. So I guess my whole sort of life story is just rolling in and just seeing where opportunity takes me.
I think that answers my question. Yes, would also.
So yeah, yes. Yes.
No, that was great. Thanks for that. How did you go from that into university? Where did you study at university?
Yeah, so
sorry, did you study?
I did, yeah, but 1.9 degrees. So not because I dropped out, because I just got bored. So I joined the Navy at 17 years old, and as part of that, I got a degree through the Australian Defence Force Academy. So they basically funded my degree. And it was kind of one of those sliding door moments when I actually joined. People asked me, why the hell did you join the Navy? I went, well, it seemed like a good idea at the time, literally. I was standing in line about to enroll in biomedical engineering at Tas Uni. Then I was working as a bike courier and had this kind of rave thing on the side that I was putting on big parties, which was fun. And the reason I was going to go on to biomedical engineering is because there was someone I desperately wanted to date who had just enrolled in biomedical engineering. Things didn't work out. I was 3 from the front, about to hand in my paperwork. Everything was filled out, etc., etc. I got a phone call from Defence Recruiting, using my mum's mobile phone. And Defence Recruiting goes, positions opened up, Weapons Electronics Engineer, Navy, ADFA, 10-year contract. Are you interested? I'd already gone through recruiting, so it wasn't just a complete surprise. And I went, yeah, fuck it, why not? And they said, this was Friday lunchtime, and they said, would you be prepared to go to Canberra and leave on Monday morning? And I went, all right. 3 from the front. Had that phone call been 5 minutes later, had my last name started with a letter further down the alphabet, I'd have to think what my life would be like now. But 3 from the front, I went, well, stuff this, I just accepted. And I remember my parents were so disappointed in me because they were really, they're very academic, and they were very worried that I wasn't going to go to university. And I was, did this bike courier thing, I got this business on the side, and they're looking at their firstborn, who's a bike courier, hanging out at raves and doing all this crazy stuff on weekends, and then going, but we wanted our son to be an engineer or something. When I came back home, Mum goes, oh, so did you enroll? She was really excited I was enrolled. I said, no, I didn't. She goes, what? I said, I'm going to the Navy instead. What? But yeah, 3 days later, I left the state, put everything packed up, and went. So how did I? Yes, I went to university. Sorry, answer, yes.
Yeah. Is the Sydney Navy is the Navy in Sydney?
Well, the Navy's in Australia.
Yeah, sure. But, yeah. So
the university's in Canberra. Okay. So it's a university campus, but it's University of New South Wales in Canberra. It's confusing, still to me this day. But no. So the way I got to Sydney is through the Navy, but I'd been in Perth, in Melbourne, in Canberra before I went to Sydney.
Sure. And so you were a weapons engineer, is that?
That's right.
Yeah. Could you tell us a little more about that?
Some of it.
Some of it?
Yeah. So the technical term is Weapons Electronics Engineering Officer, or WEO. And my role was on a warship, was to look after the department that looked after weapon systems, communication sensors, and undersea warfare. And when I was deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan, my role there was actually as fire control officer. So I sat in an operations room, a room dark like this, much smaller and cozier. And my job was literally to stare at a screen and push, and had a little button that made the missiles go whoosh and gun go bang, which is just as exciting as it sounds. And I did that for a year, 12 hours on, 12 hours off every day.
Wow.
For a year.
That's intense.
Yeah, I'm a little unhinged now.
You were in the Navy. It was a 10-year contract.
10-year contract, yeah.
Am I right in understanding that you developed some patents while you were there?
God, he's done his research. Yeah, so at the same time as doing Navy, I kept the raving thing going as well, which was kind of cool. That didn't last long. Started a few other startups, but I decided to enroll into a master's degree in electronics because whilst I was doing an operational role in the Navy, I wasn't doing hands-on engineering stuff, so I was kind of missing that aspect in my life, and I loved tinkering with electronics and software and things like that. So I enrolled to do a master's degree, and the research project was designing new sensor systems for airborne vehicles, for aircraft, which back then were called UAVs, which now is commonly called a drone. And so this is 15, 16 years ago now. And we developed the first laser-based system to scan surfaces below an airborne aircraft, moving surfaces to help that aircraft land autonomously on a moving platform. So the problem of landing a drone onto Earth had been solved. The problem of landing a drone onto something that moved had not been solved, and we did that. We were technically, well, I claimed first in the world. Northrop Grumman with billions of dollars actually beat us, but their moving platform was an aircraft carrier in very steady seas. Ours was a 3x3 metre sort of table-sized surface that was bucketing up and down in choppy waters. So I'd say, no, we actually got it, because theirs was a football field by comparison. It didn't really move. If they missed it, it didn't really matter. Ours, you missed it when in the water. So that work was patented, and it's pretty cool, pretty exciting to actually do.
You could, am I right in assuming that you could actually reach out to Elon Musk and say that your moving drone platform on the water, landing spaceships, not quite the same thing?
No, although not to discredit Elon, that technology is from the 60s. He just made it profitable.
And attractive.
Yeah.
So from that, you didn't go straight to BlueChilli after the Navy, right?
No.
What was the next step after the Navy?
Well, there's a few parallel things along the way. Next thing after the Navy kind of started while I was still in the Navy. I started a digital signage business selling TV screens to real estate agents. Any real estate agents in the room? Awesome. So much fun selling to a real estate agent. It's such a challenge, because normally on the other end, right? So this was a product that we developed. Actually, what we had was a distributed broadcast network with custom software on screens, with one of the first web-based admins that existed for managing like thousands of screens. We didn't know what we had though. Sounds just gone quiet. So we know what we had. So this business here, we were sort of leasing these screens. That was the financial model, which was great. The screens would pay themselves off in about 10 months. We'd sign 2-year contracts. These things were bolted in the floor in the real estate agent's front office. Look, I'm pretty sure they're here. We almost sold one in Queenstown before I left the business. Yes, we had national coverage, and we're starting to build the business up. And I had a fallout with my co-founder, unfortunately. He wanted to take the business down a hardware space, and he's a software engineer. I'm a hardware engineer, and I wanted to throw away the hardware because it was causing all our challenges and problems were with the hardware. Putting TV screens in windows that are in sunlight is not a good thing to do. There's heaps of challenges with cooling, environmental, and shade, and everything else. And so I started hating the fact that I was getting called out to sites to go out and fix these screens that were improperly installed, etc., etc. So we unfortunately had an argument that couldn't be resolved amicably, and that resulted in my first business divorce.
Do you have any lessons?
And only business divorce.
Do you have any lessons or anything lessons from that space?
Yeah. If you're ever in a partnership with someone, have a shareholders agreement or some sort of agreement. It's a lot easier to agree the terms of how a breakup will occur while you're still talking to the other party. We didn't have that, which has taught me a lot about contracts. The way we actually resolved this is we invoked what's called a shotgun clause, which is a very brutal and very final way of ending a business transaction or relationship, and it works. A shotgun clause is the adult way of saying you cut, I choose. So the way the relationship ended eventually, we agreed to this, is with a lawyer present, 3 of us sitting at the table, me, my co-founder and a lawyer, and we both agreed that we would be bound by the decision that was going to be made in this room, and if the decision was not to be made, the lawyer had power of attorney to wind the company up and both of us would get nothing. Right? So that was the decision. So we basically, to quote the Vikings, we burnt the boats. There's only one way out of this room. We're going to have a resolution. And the agreement was, I would write a number on a bit of paper, hand it to the lawyer, and then hand it to the co-founder, and then he had 10 minutes to decide whether to accept that as payment for his shares or pay me that as payment for mine. I cut, he chews. Right? So I'll tell you what, it's the perfect way of establishing true value between two parties. And there's all sorts of game and psychology and things that can go into this, but I essentially set a number that was low enough that I knew he could afford, because at this stage I was kind of over it and I wanted to get out, but I still wanted to be compensated for a lot of the finances I put into this that I got from my exit before. So, yeah, That's one of my important lessons. Make sure you have good contracts and shareholders agreements while you're still out on good terms.
That's a great lesson. And
Very expensive lesson.
as well as the businesses, well, those two businesses, you're involved in, like these days, you're involved in a lot of different boards, voluntary organisations, different establishments like YPO and things like that. Have you always been, like, I'm getting the pattern I'm seeing is that you have a lot on the go at all times.
Yes.
How did you get into being involved with some of those ones like YPO and Club Kidpreneur?
Yeah, Club Kidpreneur is an interesting one. So YPO is easier. I was invited, so it's a very short answer. Club Kidpreneur is a bit different. So Club Kidpreneur is an organisation that was founded by a serial entrepreneur by the name of Krill Price, who sold his business 3 days before the GFC to a bank. And made $115 million out of it, which was a business in telemarketing and automation of sales for life insurance products, or insurance products in general. You can imagine just after the GFC, people were not selling life insurance business. He got out at the perfect time, the peak. Anyway, so he believes, and his philosophy is that the future of us in society is going to be driven by entrepreneurship. It's not going to be by government. You can see around the world what's happening there. It's not necessarily going to be by charities because they have very narrow focuses, and the business model of charity is not sustainable inherently. It's going to be solved, his philosophy is it's going to be solved by people who become wealthy through their own means and then give back through either philanthropy or be able to support other people to become successful through their means. And he says, so in order for that to occur, we need to foster a generation of entrepreneurial people. And that doesn't start at university, it doesn't start at high school, it starts at primary school. And so Club Kidpreneur is to give 8 to 10-year-olds the tools, if you like, and the experiences so they can actually try and start a little sunscreen squirt business of their own. But most importantly, it's about giving them the confidence that they can. A lot of kids who struggle through school struggle because they're bored. And they're struggling because they're bored. They may not feel like they have a place to play in society afterwards because society is sort of conditioning them to go down this pathway. It's changing, but conditioning them down this pathway. Whereas what we want to do is at a very early age, give them another opportunity, another life. So what Club K does is we mentor and teach these kids over the course of either a 2-day workshop or over 8 weeks on how to set up and build a micro business selling something and give them the confidence to sell their wares at a market, a public market. So I came in very, very early on the piece of Club Kidpreneur and helped set up that model of the training and the teaching, and actually took the first couple of 100 kids through it as well, and then I started training the trainers. I'm less involved now, it's sort of scaled beyond me now, but it's still going, it's awesome. I think we put about 50,000 kids through it now, so yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah, so that's Club Kidpreneur.
Wicked. Is there anything else that you're involved with other than BlueChilli at the moment? We'll get to BlueChilli.
I am a founding member of the Awesome Foundation in Sydney.
Great name.
I'm sure there's a chapter in New Zealand. I'm sure of it. If there isn't, there should be. And one of you guys should set it up. Is there one? Yeah? Ministry. It's a bit different to Ministry of Awesome, and I've met Kayla. But no, it's the Awesome Foundation is there's chapters like this around the world. Once a month, 10 of us meet and review pitches that were sent to us in the previous month. We each chuck in $100 into a brown paper bag, and once a month we give $1,000, no strings attached, to an idea just because it's awesome. That's it. So it's just pure donation, just to make our city, our lives, and ourselves feel a little bit more awesome. And the ideas that come through are completely varied. Like it's installing beehives in primary schools to teach kids about bees. That was one of them. That we funded. Another one was this civic space that was just pretty awful in Sydney, and there was an urban planner goes, it'd just be awesome while we're waiting for the train to be able to play ping pong. So we gave him $1,000 to buy a bunch of second-hand ping pong tables and put them out there for a couple of weeks. Like, it's just no strings attached ideas like that. That's the Awesome Foundation. And I must admit, ours in the Sydney chapter tend to be those sort of outdoor, creative art style projects. But then you go to the Awesome Foundation in Uganda, or the ones in Southeast Asia, and you look what $1,000 does there, it changes people's lives. So I do feel a little guilty that we're sort of doing this, but we're just making Sydney a little bit more awesome in our way. That's the Awesome Foundation. Yeah.
That's great. I hope someone starts that in Auckland. Why did you start BlueChilli?
why did I start BlueChilli? Well, again, I kind of fell into it. So after I did the digital signage thing, I kind of faffed around for a bit, for a year, basically selling my time as a consultant, helping people with technology and ideas as I was just trying to find out what to do in life. So it was so varied. I wore a suit. I don't wear a suit now. And I was, the genesis or the creative idea for where BlueChilli was born actually came from, and this sounds so stereotypical and I apologise in advance, came from Ubud. I was at one of those big share houses in Bali with a group of friends. We were at a friend's wedding. We were I think it was table 29, we were the extras, all of us, and we realised that. It's like none of us are actually even close social friends, but we're all entrepreneurial, so we must be because of the business contacts. And he's invited us to a wedding in Bali, and I'm going to go because he probably doesn't expect it to. He ended up being my seed investor, by the way, so anyway. And there was a group of us just in one of those big share houses with a pool, and we're just sort of bobbing around the pool, just talking about startups and ideas, and just spinning it as you do, with a beer. It's great. Now, the idea came from, indirectly, from this amazing entrepreneur I have so much respect for in Australia. Her name's Kirsty Dunphy. She was the youngest Australian to ever have a real estate license at 19 years old or something. And I know there's a recurring theme of real estate here. That's the coincidence. So she's the youngest Australian to ever hold a real estate license at 19, and she owned the Harcourts franchise, not just one, but for all of Tasmania at like 23, and retired at 24, multi-millionaire. It's just absolutely nuts, and it's like a complete rags to riches story. She started out cleaning hotel rooms, and then worked her way up to that. So it's awesome. And she had a concept. This would have been 2010. She had a concept for an app or for a mobile solution. Where if something is wrong in a rental property, so you're a tenant and something's broken, actually getting it repaired is a pain in the ass. And it's an awful experience for the tenant, it's an awful experience for the property manager, it's an awful experience for the contractor who's actually doing the work. So she wanted to do something in that space. And so I went, yeah, I could build that in 2 weeks. A couple of months later, I launched it with a classic engineer over his own committee. And the business launch was called Rent-A-Fixer. It never went anywhere. For million and one reasons, but it gave me that idea. Here was someone who was amazing, that had a huge amount of industry insight and knowledge, and had identified a problem that might seem obvious in hindsight, but she understood how that problem could really change the way that industry works and the lives of people around it works. But she couldn't code, and in my logic, nor should she. I could put together some technology, and I really enjoyed that, and I thought there must be something in this where I can find other people like Kirsty who have these amazing ideas, deep industry insights, and where I could pull together a group of people that could do the technology for it. And what about if I created a model where I can help them launch and start and get them off the ground, and make that empower them ultimately to create their life's work. And that was the genesis for BlueChilli, and I've spent the last 7 years iterating on that model.
I'm glad to hear it involved drinking some bintang in Bali. I'm curious as to what the vision for BlueChilli is, and I guess maybe how it's changed over time and all that. So how long have you, it's been
almost 7 years.
Almost 7 years now. Is it different now to what it was in Ubud?
In Ubud, yeah. It wasn't a business then. It's evolved. So it has evolved in a bigger, as my eyes get more opened up to more opportunities globally, it's definitely evolved. I wouldn't say that our core has changed significantly though. The core component of being able to support domain experts with technology, with capital, with access networks, things like that, all those ingredients existed in some immature way when we first started. They're a lot more profound and matured now, and they're a lot more robust, and there's a lot more structure around it. But the core thing has maintained true. Our vision has evolved. I think a vision should, because we learn that we keep exceeding ourselves. My first vision was actually a bad one. It was a goal, not a vision. I thought it was a vision, but it's not. It was, we're going to build 100 startups by 2016, which was a 5-year window. That was our vision. The problem with that as a stated vision is there's no real broader than you element to that. It's a very self-serving vision. And so now our vision is actually much more open, it's much broader. It's about enabling entrepreneurs to be able to do their life's work. It's much bigger. It's bigger than us, which means that for us, it gives us permission to do more community things, to more social impact things that might not necessarily be around the purely monetary building a company, but it will support us in creating ecosystems that can support entrepreneurs to do their life's work. So that's why we're a little bit bigger than that now. So it's definitely evolved as we've matured, as I've matured.
And so did it start as you were providing a service? Because it's evolved a lot in terms of what you offer as an organisation. Was it a service at the beginning?
Yeah, we fucked up the business model quite a few times. We really did. Listen, I really feel for some of our early entrepreneurs, particularly the ones that are still going. Like, I give them a lot of support now. It's like, thank you, because I feel guilty in a way, but thank you for bearing with me through those tumultuous times 5-6 years ago as we were trying to work out what we were doing. Where it is now is it's a lot more stable, so I'm very, very happy with how the business model's evolved now. So when we first started, we basically had a discounted development services. We had engineers, and we were sort of building this up. Engineers and creatives, and the idea was that our entrepreneurial partners would bring the sales, the marketing, and the domain knowledge, and then we would provide the technology as a service. And so we effectively positioned ourselves as our outsourced CTO, which was fine when we had like 4 or 5 companies. I was the outsourced CTO, and I didn't bill for my time. I don't think I've ever billed for my time. It's terrible. But the engineering team did. They did it on a cost recovery basis in exchange for offsetting the profit margin that we would otherwise take in for a pure agency. We took a small amount of equity in the startup. That's how we started. The problem with that is there's all sorts of underlined incentives inherent in that sort of service delivery model. If I'm charging per hour, my incentive is to do more. Your incentive is for me to do less because you don't want to pay more. So there's straight away we're not aligned as business partners. So we decided to change that. We go, okay, well that's not working, let's do a fixed price. So we'll just cap it, so you know exactly what our expectation is, and we're going to build to an objective. So we'll make it outcomes focused, not input focused. So instead of focusing on how much input we put in, we're going to focus on the outcome we're going to achieve. But that also introduced another negative incentive, which was now our entrepreneurial founders wanted more from what we could afford. So the incentive was for us to do as least as possible and for them to get as much as possible. And that caused all sorts of arguments and concerns, and it introduced a lot of, anyone in a service delivery model right now would appreciate a lot of these concerns, be it building buildings and property all the way through to providing financial services. It's the same, right? So these are perhaps obvious to a lot of people. So the way, good, I'm getting one person going, yeah. The way we solved that was, well, what if we didn't charge at all? So what if we just removed the financial component to it, and we provided our engineering team for nothing instead of in exchange for equity. We provide an engineering team, and it was a fixed equity position as well. So we weren't, the more work we did didn't mean we got more of the company. That's an awful incentive structure there. So we arrived at this point now. We kept changing this and tweaked some of the numbers, and I think at one point we said, well, provide a small amount of finance up front, so invest a little bit of your own money in the business, because that way we're both tired. We took that out. But where we're at now is, in exchange for 15% equity, we take entrepreneurs with Ideasstage companies, so there's nothing. We provide an engineering team for between 3 and 6 months, $38,000 in cash up front, a 6 to 12 month accelerator program, access to customers, and then have the ability to invest up to $500,000 at the next stage. And the best thing about that model, though, is that we're all aligned with the same thing. We all want the same outcome, which is to build value into that business. So through 6 iterations and 7 years of experimentation, we finally arrived at something that worked.
Thank you for that. It's very valuable.
I think the answer was yes.
The latter business model you've landed on, though, how do you fund that? Because that's the problem I see with trying to do that.
Yes, that's right. My board asked me the same question. How can you fund this? No, so that last piece came to play about 2 years ago, which is to remove the cost component. So if you're looking at this from a purely economic perspective, from a financial model, I have 2 parts of the organisation. One is our corporate innovation arm, the other one is our service delivery arm for startups. And there's venture capital is the third, the smaller bit is the third part to it. And so we made a conscious decision to say no to 60% of our revenue. Just turn it off. Yet my costs were still there. We didn't actually get rid of any of the costs. The costs were all still there. And I was able to do that because I was chasing an opportunity with a large venture capital organisation based out in Singapore. But they wanted me to prove that I could do this first. So we went, yeah, cool. We'll underwrite this for one cohort, one group of entrepreneurs coming through. It was a small cohort as well, so it wasn't too bad for us. Unfortunately, contract negotiations take time. That 6-month experiment was 2 years. That hurt. So I underwrote it for 2 years. But what we do is we've got this partnership with this group in Singapore, and they are providing us a fixed agreed sum of money in exchange for a small amount of equity in every single company that we build for the next 240 companies. So they've effectively underwritten my development capability to build 240 startups. So effectively what we're doing is we're pre-selling some of our equity to this larger VC organisation. In exchange, they're providing us with funds which we can use to build the technology which we use to earn the equity in the first place. And from our founders, because everything we do is for the entrepreneurs first, they've got access now to a much, much larger sum of capital, which provide half of that $500,000 that we've got available to invest in the startups later stage, and a global access of LPs around the world. So that's how.
Cool.
Yeah, it wasn't a short answer.
I'm always interested in things like that because they don't happen overnight.
No.
So how did you establish that kind of relationship with a person that we're willing to commit that type of contract?
Yeah, so that actually came through the YPO Network. So YPO stands for Young Presidents Organisation, which is a very American sounding name because it's a very American organisation. It's a private club, my wife calls it a cult. It's very cult-like, but it's basically 20,000 business leaders from around the world, invitation only. There's a certain size company and organisation you need to be at, and you either have to run a large family office, be in charge of hundreds and hundreds of people in the corporate, or be like senior corporate manager, or run your own company at a certain size. And you're invited in, you pay fees, and it's all based on professional development around self, around family, and around business. And one of the key things they have is you're not allowed to sell to each other. So it's a non-solicitation rule, which is amazing because, you know, I know Sub Grind has that philosophy of, well, you should give before you ask, give before you receive. But what if you actually made it a hard rule that, you know, if you were selling to each other, you got kicked out of the room and never be invited back again? It's a very different dynamic, which means people are genuinely wanting to help each other. It's awesome. Anyway, so that partnership came through a connection I made through that network in Singapore. Yeah.
So keep networking.
Keep networking. Yeah. I mean, it was a 2-year relationship to get to a close. The contract was only signed about 4 months ago. We started that relationship 2.5 years ago.
So since 6 months, did you say 6 months ago?
Something like that.
Yeah. So how many
it's been
startups?
A crazy year.
How many startups have been funded? So you've got the 240 goal. How many have been funded since the last 6 months?
So the 240 goal started on the 1st of July, and we have funded, I think, around 15 through there so far. So we're a little bit behind where we need to be.
Anyone got an idea? So the team inside BlueChilli, how do you incentivize them? How do you keep them engaged if they're building other people's companies?
Yeah, the culture of an organisation, I think, is one of the things that people often look at too late. You need to really invest in the culture of your companies before you get to. In fact, I think when you hire your first person, but you must do it before you get to a team size of 20. Because at 20, the dynamic within an organisation is you get a culture whether you like it or not. And you basically get the culture that exists at that size, and it's usually the loudest voice. So you need to drive it from the beginning. If not, you end up with a culture that you may not like. So we've been very proactive right from the beginning in our company at maintaining a culture. Now, a culture is an interesting thing. It's not something that's tangible. You can't just, select a culture from a list of drop-downs online and buy it, and you get it. It doesn't exist like that. It's an output. But you can do things to create the environment of which a culture can survive. And certain things like, we don't like saying we want to only hire people that fit to our culture. Culture fit is a very narrow term. It means that you only get people like yourself, which is not actually a good thing, believe it or not. I don't care who you are. You want to have people that add to a culture. So we look for people that can add additional things to. It comes down to, the practical thing, the way we do it in BlueChilli is, ultimately we're working with entrepreneurs, passionate people who are driven to succeed, who are putting everything on the line to be able to create something awesome and something big. And they are risking everything for it. So we need people that can respect that and can work with others like that. And so what ultimately I want is people who are passionate about something. Because every entrepreneur client that comes through our doors, every founder that comes through into BlueChilli is passionate about something. And so we need people in our company that are passionate. And I actually really don't care what you're passionate about when you come and work for me. I just want to see that passion somewhere. So I always do the last interview with everyone, from first employee all the way through to the ones we hired a couple of weeks ago. Every employee I always do the last interview, and we just go for a walk and we just talk about stuff. And I ask questions about what they do on weekends, and because I'm generally interested to see where that passion is. And if someone says, look, I'm just passionate about Netflix, I friggin' love movies, and I just watch them all the time, and I tease them. I say, okay, well, tell me more about which ones do you really like? And if they start really exploring that passion with me, and you can see it, like their eyes light up, you go, okay, you're someone that'll fit into BlueChilli. And the next person will be like a world champion karate kickboxer. No shit, we have someone like that was. Someone that owned a bar, and he was so passionate about whiskey and coffee. He would just talk anyone over coffee. Someone who was passionate about mindfulness and used to run a startup in the mindfulness space, teaching the executives at Google how to relax and actually be human. So I may have interjected those words. So these people are all passionate. Everyone in the company is passionate, which is important for us as a culture, because we're working with people who inherently are passionate. And by being passionate about something ourselves, we can relate, and that's very, very important to me. So our culture is defined in three company values: people, purpose, passion. So we work with people, so people is very important to me. We're a service delivery business, really at our core. I know we're venture capital, but at our core, we're a service or a people company. We want people that have a sense of purpose. And a purpose in life can be anything, again, but it needs to be aligned somewhat in the direction we want to go. And then passion is that spice that adds to it as well, that means it's easier for us. So culture is something you agree at the start. Those three words came from a whiteboard session we ran in the middle of Hyde Park with a little sort of portable whiteboard when there were only 6 of us. We all sat around out there and said, oh, what kind of company do we want to build here? That came out of it.
That's awesome. Sounds like such a good company.
Well, I think so.
Yeah.
Pretty passionate.
I'm interested in a thing you said earlier around you offer a path to customers as well for startups going through accelerators. How do you offer that?
Yeah, customer discovery and getting customers, I think, is the thing that is often forgotten about in startups. If you don't have a startup, so if you have a startup and you don't have customers, you've got an expensive hobby. So what I want to do is say, well, how can we reduce the risk out of the customers? And just to abstract out a little bit, this came to be when we started looking at, well, what are all the reasons why startups fail? Let's look at the lens of venture capital from a failure perspective. Everyone's on this mantra of fail fast, fail often, failure's okay. Well, let's look at the reasons why, and let's see how we can support not doing those things. Yeah, support those reasons, support not doing those reasons. So, there's a lot of reports and studies, and we used off-the-shelf data here. We didn't do anything special. We just sort of curated all this, and we sort of, any one of the reports or big studies done always comes down to 4 or 5 common themes. And we just name those. Startups fail because they build the wrong technology, they fail to get traction, so sales, they run out of money, tender, and they don't or can't find the right team. So team also extends a little bit into networks as well. So startups fail because of technology, traction, tender, money, and team. The 5th one is timing. So you could have the best idea, the best team, the right amount of money, and sales, but if you've got the wrong timing, which is an external factor, you'd be the Friendster to the Facebook. So MySpace existed before Facebook, but Facebook had the right time. Airbnb and Uber wouldn't be as big if it wasn't for the GFC, because suddenly people are under financial pressure. Pre-GFC, there's no way someone who had an apartment in New York would allow someone else to sleep on their couch. Hell no, why would I do that? Post-GFC, it's like every dollar counts, bring it in. So they were a factor of, the timing was a large degree of their success. It wasn't the only degree, but it was a large factor of their success. So we looked at those 4 things there. You can't control timing. So we looked at the other 4 and said, well, how do we mitigate the risk in each of those 4 areas? So for the technology, we provide a tech team to build the first version. 42% of startups fail because they're on tech. Yet 75% of all startup budgets, seed budgets and pre-seed budgets, goes towards technology. So we said, well, here's a huge opportunity for us to reduce that failure rate somewhat by having a team of people that already work together and having tool sets and code bases that we can reuse to be able to spin up things quickly with the tech. Traction is the interesting one. So traction is an example of product market fit. Right? So if you get product market fit, you achieve traction. It's the cheeky way is find out what someone wants and give it to them. The problem with the term product market fit is it's been misconceived or misunderstood a lot around the world. When Horowitz first defined it back in his Netscape days, he intended it to mean start with a market and iterate your product to fit that market. Unfortunately, and I put my hand on my heart and say I'm one of these people, the way the world's engineers interpreted that was start with a product and iterate your marketing to fit. Which I call the developer's dilemma, which is it's very easy for us as engineers to build something, and we love doing it. We love solving a big problem or a challenge. And it's very easy for us to go, in our proverbial garage and start hacking about on some hardware or some software, and we build something and we put it out to the market. Internet's, it's infinite, everyone's on there, and no one buys it. And we go, shit, I better add more features. I'll go back to which is totally the wrong thing to do. And the whole lean startup movement that was developed by Steve Blank was intended to help engineers primarily understand how to talk to customers. So I looked at this and go, okay, customers. So the problem with a market is it's an abstract entity. It's not a thing. I can't grab a market and stick it in my decision room and we make a decision. We can invest in something. So what we've done is we've looked for a proxy to a market, which we see as enterprises or corporates. We believe corporates or large entities that have distribution networks and distribution channels have an innate understanding of what a market needs because they're in the middle of it, or sometimes they're creating it. And so what we want to do is ask them, what are the challenges you face and your customers face? And then we'll find startup ideas that can support that or address that. And so our startups that come through us inherently are B2B startups because they're looking to solve a problem or a challenge that one of our corporate partners or one of our partners of our corporate partners are facing. And through the programs that we run, we introduce our startup founders very early on in the piece before they build a single thing to those corporate partners, and the network effect then kicks on. So that's how we address the risk or the market traction risk.
Who are some of those partners?
This is a great segue to our latest program. Awesome. So we've worked with large tech companies like LinkedIn, Google, Microsoft, MYOB is actually a client of ours. They're a huge supporter of our She Starts program, which is to invest in women-led businesses. So thank you, MYOB, again for that. ANZ, large banks. We've worked with ANZ, Westpac, Macquarie Bank, FMCG groups. We've done GSK. We've done a big program with Coca-Cola Amatil. In fact, our current program right now, which is also in Auckland, is with CCA's backing. I've been out to the Mount Wellington plant, which is really cool. So excited watching all the Cokes go past. It's an engineering nerd. And we just launched yesterday a program with Stockland. Stockland is one of Australia's largest property development groups. So we're now looking for ideas that can help make a community more connected in every definition of the term connected. So what Stockland do is they don't build towers or one-off houses. They don't take a one-year approach to development. They're looking at generational development. They build suburbs. So they've got projects on the go right now where they're building 50,000 houses outside of the outskirts of some of the cities in Australia, where they're building 50,000 houses over 30 years. They start with 5,000 houses in a primary school and end up with 50,000 houses, 5 schools, a university, a hospital, and a shopping centre. So they follow the evolution, the aging of their community as they age. They build the services around it. And what they're looking for is startup ideas, technology ideas that can support those communities, that can make living within a city more, or a community like that, more connected, more smarter, which is everything from drones delivering things, coming from the shopping centres, landing on roofs, through to power consumption meters to make electricity more amenable, to sharing tools through open shed type platforms, through everything you can imagine to make a community more connected. So they're a partner. We're now looking for startups in Australia and New Zealand that can support that. I promise that's the only big plug you'll get from me tonight.
What's driven the interest in coming to New Zealand?
Wow, that's a good question. I've told this joke so many times that I can't remember if I actually told it tonight. But someone asked me, why New Zealand? It's because it's 2 hours closer than Perth. But no, look, New Zealand for me, I grew up in Hobart, as I mentioned before, in Tasmania, and there's a lot of similarities between New Zealand and Tasmania. So I have there's a part of me that has a strong kindred connection to New Zealand. But really, I saw an opportunity to come and support a community that was growing and to see how we could take our unique model and support startup founders and entrepreneurs that are here. So we've taken a very low-key approach. We want to see if there is a genuine interest in BlueChilli being here and supporting. And we've already got 2 amazing startups that have come through New Zealand through one of our programs. So we've demonstrated that yes, we're taking our time, we're doing it slowly, we're certainly not trying to come in and tell everyone how it's done. In fact, one of those startup founders is in the room. I'm going to embarrass her for a second, Andrea. Yep. Fantastic startup in the logistics space, tracking logistics for high sensitive goods, environmental data, which is really cool. It's a hardware project as well, which really appeals to me personally. But yeah, so we've come here because A, it's closer than Perth. B, I have this strong desire for BlueChilli to be an international organisation where we have a network of networks. So I want to be throughout Southeast Asia and ASEAN countries. I want to have BlueChilli accelerators that are supporting entrepreneurs that come from all different areas, because the diversity of thought, the diversity of ideas only comes by having a diverse ecosystem. The challenges that people in Indonesia, in Myanmar are facing are totally different to what we're facing in Australia, totally different to what farmers in New Zealand are facing, totally different to what property developers in China are facing. But they're all really big, chunky challenges that need to be solved. And so I want to bring technology to be able to support entrepreneurs no matter where they are, to be able to support those ideas and those challenges. And so that starts with getting out of Australia.
Is there many... Okay, great. Is there many startups that are coming through that are social ventures, social enterprises?
Yeah, we've got a few social enterprises come through. I mean, the challenge with social enterprises is how do you marry the social impact drive with the impact driver of, sorry, with the driving factor of venture capital. So venture capital is all about investing heavy, it's about investing in many, concentrating your returns on 1 or 2 assets and then flipping them at some point in the future. That's the VC model. We're a little bit different to VC, but inherently that's the venture capital model, which is not necessarily always in line with the objectives of the social impact business. And we have a few social impact businesses in BlueChilli. The way that we worked out how to reconcile those differences is we create an entity which is the social vehicle, which then owns the business that we're creating. And if the business is successful and has a massive exit, it then funds and fuels the social impact company to be able to do good things. And the founders own or control the social impact vehicle, and then all the venture and all the work we do goes into the subsidiary at the bottom. So it keeps the two somewhat separate, even though one owns the lion's share of the other, but also keeps our focus and our incentives aligned. The more successful we can become at this venture at the bottom, the more likely it is that social impact venture at the top has the means and the fuel to be able to have a greater impact. But I don't think, so that's on a pure social impact thing, but I don't think for a second that you can't have both in a company. I think all companies have a responsibility in having some sort of social impact inherent to their business model, which is why there's certain industries BlueChilli will just not touch.
Yeah, I agree with that. You mentioned exits a couple of times in VC models. Yeah. Is there a story you can tell us about one of the exits at BlueChilli? And then I'm going to sort of open it up for Q&A, so start thinking about your questions if you've got them.
Yeah, we've had 3 exits, 2 M&As, 1 IPO. BlueChilli as a model is still fairly new, still fairly young. We've been doing this for 6 years. In the first year we had 4 companies, and the last year we did 40, we're going to do another 40 this year, so 120 companies we built are all inherently, most of them are less than 2 years old. So it's not fair, I think, yet to talk about success or failure rates. We do track things along the way, obviously, because you don't want to wait for an exit, which takes 7 years to work out if you're successful or not, because it's too late if you weren't to make any changes. So the metrics we track instead are how many startups did we start actually launch a product? How many startups did we start actually get a customer? And how many startups did we start actually receive funding? So they're the things that we track as the closest proxies we can to indications of successful growth paths along the way. So we're at 85% launch. Our target is 75% customer acquisition. We're a little bit below that. We're at 69% now. But 60% of our companies are able to raise seed funding outside of the funds we provide. So that one I'm actually quite proud of.
Does anyone have any questions? Surely. Here we go.
Yeah, what about if someone had, oh, I can talk pretty loud.
Yeah.
What about like you said it mainly like if, it's kind of for people they have an idea that haven't really done anything and you guys provide everything. What about if someone had like a prototype and they've done a little bit of, because you know maybe they're not quite sure what the idea is themselves, so they make a prototype. How would you approach that? Because they've kind of done some work, they might have some code, you know, they might already have a couple of people working with them.
Yeah, so that to me is an indicator you're serious about something, which is a positive thing. So it's not going to bias our decision not to accept one of our programs. Oh, you've started doing something, no, we're not going to take it, it's not right. So it's that we can work with Ideasstage companies, and we prefer to because we add a lot of value there. So for ideas and companies and people that have already done something, what you need to do is decide in yourself is the services that we can add around you and support you, and the equity position that we take or receive in exchange for that still worth the stage you're at. Because at some point, you'll get down a certain pathway of development where the 15% the BlueChilli and our venture funds receive is not fair. And I would also agree with you that one. Like if you've raised capital or if you've got a certain amount of turnover coming through the business, there's a certain point where those equity terms just don't make sense for you. So that's more the indicator, and only you can address that. We do have entrepreneurs that come to us with technology, with things built, and so what we look to do is complement the skill sets within the team. So I'll use one example that's in the same cohort as Ed, which is a business called Air Tracker. And so Michael, the entrepreneur, he's an electronics engineer. He's developed this mushroom-shaped sensor that monitors and tracks environmental data, 50 different environmental data, and sends it back to a third-party server. And he's built this thing, and he's got a contract already to release 1,000 of these across Mexico City. And the intention is to be able to monitor pollution in the city. What we did, so whilst we do have a little bit of hardware capability, what we did for Michael is, okay, you keep doing the hardware, because you're good at that. What we'll do is we'll do the API, the back-end infrastructure, the front end, and also the algorithms to be able to take all this information and triangulate where the source of pollution is coming from. So for him, even though he'd already spent quite a lot of money and several years of R&D of his own time and effort in building this thing, he still saw value in all the additional services that we're going to provide around him. And that was a decision he made, and it was good for him. But there are other cases where people will decide, you know what, I think the equity position is not fair for me, and we'll go, yeah, cool. You don't have to. Yeah.
What's your philosophy for visiting founders? Like, what specifically do you look for in such an early stage?
Yeah, what do we look for in an early stage founder when making investment decisions? It's a really good question, because often there isn't anything else. The decision we make right at the start is in line with those 4 risk areas we look at, with one of them weighted a lot more than the others. So rather than saying what do we look for, I might describe the process of how, because that will help you do it. So ultimately, the entrepreneur is the most important thing. The founder is the most important thing in any investment decision, we believe. And so our process is structured around giving us the clearest ability to see what an entrepreneur is like before we've made an investment, which means putting you through a few challenges at the start of our process. We look for ideas. So when an entrepreneur applies to one of our programs, like with the Stockholm Accelerator now, you go online, you fill out a bunch of questions, and it's an online form, and that's just to give us a concept of the idea, and then based on that, we then consult with our corporate partners, and we say, look, all these ideas, and we typically get between 500 and 1,000 of all those ideas that we have on this forms. Which ones do you think are within the scope of the kind of things that you would invest in, right? So we're really hitting that investment one first. And we cast a broad net. We'll identify the top 100. From those top 100, we then usually ask for further information. That further information is all about the person, not about the idea. And then from that, we then extrapolate and find the top 40 to 50 people that we want. And we invite them into a practical boot camp. We provide a travel stipend as those who are outside of Sydney as well. So we invite the top 40 into a practical boot camp. The boot camp goes for 2 weeks. We teach you how to pitch. We teach you all the skills and presentations, and what we're looking for here is how you listen, how you take the feedback, the criticisms, and the challenges we provide, and how you respond to those. So at the end of that 2 weeks, you then present in front of a panel of judges, and the judges are made up from someone from our corporate partner who's looking at market viability, someone from my engineering team who's worked with you now for 2 weeks that can tell me, is this thing actually going to work? Someone from our venture team who says, is this an investable business or not? And finally, one of our entrepreneurs in residence who's been tracking and monitoring you over the 2 weeks, who tells us what you're like as an individual to work with over 2 weeks. And we make an assessment based on the presentation that you give us in that judging room. It's about half of it, but also about how you went over the 2 weeks. We record everything. So that's how we make a decision. Yeah, it's very streamlined. We've received, I think, 12,500 pitches now. So we're starting to get good at going through that.
What's the ratio of pitches to?
It's about 2% actually get through. 2% of applicants, 2 to 5% of applicants actually make it into boot camp. We take 10 to 15 startups from boot camp into actual investments, and of the 10 to 15, 8 to 12 survive the first year.
Any other questions?
Do you have a strict rule about your 15% equity stake?
Yes, which is why, leading to the question before, it's not applicable to everyone. And so we're very upfront with that. But we have standardised it because it just makes it so much easier. One of my learnings of the business models of the past is it wasn't standardised, which meant that every time an entrepreneur was thinking of coming to us, we were selling to them. I didn't want to be in that position where I'm convincing you to take more equity, because it's an unfair relationship, because we're more experienced at arguing the terms than you are. And it's not introducing the right buyers from day zero. So we got rid of it by just saying standard. We acknowledge that this means we do miss out on opportunities all the time, but that was a lesser evil than what was happening before.
So in future raises, you'll be dilutable like everyone else?
Yeah. So our equity is dilutable. It's the same as everyone else. There are certain clauses we put in the shareholders agreement that give a right to veto rights, but we give those to the angel investors that come in. And so the idea of our shareholders agreement is not actually designed for now, it's designed for the angel round, because 9 times out of 10 there's no negotiation on our shareholders agreement, which makes that angel round or the seed round much easier and cheaper and smoother for everyone, because angel investors come in and go, oh, so we just get all those veto rights? Yeah, and we've pre-agreed, yeah. I was like, cool, we hand them over. We don't want them, so someone else can have them. Yeah, but no, we definitely dilute, and the $500,000 in venture funding that we have access to is on the same terms of whatever you can get out in the market. So it's dumb money, it's follow-on money.
I was interested in how you distribute your engineering services. So, do you have separate project teams for the company? Do you have multiple engineering teams working on multiple projects? And when it comes to scaling up development, how do you deal with it?
Yeah, so there's 2 very different questions there. How do we deal with it in the small scale, and then how we help with the scaling aspect afterwards. So the first thing with our engineering is they're all in-house, and they're all in Australia. Yeah, we've got some designers and product people in New Zealand, but all of our engineers are actually in Australia. So our product team is primarily Australian-based, and there's a couple of people here in New Zealand. So we don't use third-party contractors, we don't use offshore development firms, they're all in-house. All of our engineers are incentivised through phantom options in your startup that we give through our equity stake. So if your startup is successful, our engineers get a payday as well. We have a giant novelty-sized cheque that we give as well, which is something. Our first major exit, just a bit of a side, the lead engineer who got the lion's share of the bought a Tesla, which is exactly what I want my lead engineer to buy, with a bonus cheque from an exit of a startup. Buy a Tesla, it's awesome. Anyway, big novelty cheque. All the engineers are in Australia. We have pods, and the pods do change because the skill set is different. For what you need today is what you may not need in 3 or 4 months' time. So if you need an AI guy to put an AI algorithm together, that happens at the beginning, and we use training data, but you might now need my API guy to be able to identify the right training sources and put that together, and then my front-end team to then build the front-end for that. So the team will evolve and change over time, but you generally have a pod. It could be 3 to 5 people in the pod, and generally speaking, you only have one product manager that is with you the whole time, and they're usually on 3 to 4 projects. So you get a lot of face time. Yeah. Remember, our incentive is to make this work, so yeah, we'll do everything we can to do it. Next question, which is how do you scale it up afterwards? So we help you raise capital so you can hire your own team. So that's how. So our team stays with us, and then we help with the transition so that you can then hire your own engineers and then take it on after us. We don't want to be in a position to support. We can. We're often called on that a lot. When there's emerging projects or emergency fixes that need to be done, you need to suddenly flash up 3 or 4 engineers, we can provide those. But yeah, it's not our core business.
Cool. One more question.
So there's a few industries you don't touch.
Yes.
I'm interested in that, and why?
tobacco, coal mining, and gambling. I don't think I need to explain why.
Awesome. Can I get a round of applause for Sebastien?